You're a little bit stuck. I'm not there to answer your questions. Well, here I am to answer the questions about the mock exam feedback. Now, for one of the questions, it asked you about law enforcement. Lots of you wrote about punishments. Law enforcement is who is keeping the law, who's stopping laws being broken. Now it's the police. But back in the day, it would have been different things. If you go back beyond the industrial period, different types of people, groups were in charge of law enforcement, enforcing the law. Sheriffs, for example. Tithings is another example. Law enforcement is all about catching the criminals or stopping the criminals in the first place. So punishments don't come into law enforcement. For question number 2, if a specific factor is named in a question, you must write about that factor. If it says Norman tactics, one of your paragraphs should be about Norman tactics. But, and this is a mistake many of you made, you have to write about other factors as well. You can't just write about Norman tactics. You might mention luck, Harold's mistakes, and so on. So, some of you made the mistake of not writing about the factor in the question, and some of you only wrote about the factor in the question. You've got to assess the factors against other factors. For question 3, you only really need to do 4 sentences for a 4-mark question. Describing it, though. You have to name the thing, describe it. Name the thing, describe it. You'll be fine. A 12-mark question should be paragraph, paragraph, paragraph. 3 paragraphs. If you can only think of 2, you can still get good marks. We're still, finding out ourselves what you can get for what things in this module, because it's totally new. But if you're thinking, I can't think of 3, don't panic, just do 2. Do 2 good ones, I'm sure you can still get good marks. Number 5, a 16-mark question. Well, it's still got 3 paragraphs, ideally, unless you can only think of 2. But a 16-marker should have an intro and a conclusion. For a 16-marker, if you're struggling, you can always fall back on doing for and against the factor that's named in the question. But ideally, you'll do 3 on 3 different factors. 7. Loads of you wrote about the Normans' excellent tactic of a shield wall. They didn't have a shield wall. The Saxons had the shield wall at the top of Senlac Hill, and the Normans struggled to break it down. The feigned retreat is one key way they did manage to break down that shield wall. How much revision did you do for this exam? It's a trick question. I'm not going to go mental. It's helpful. If you didn't really revise as much as you could have, write it down, because that might explain your grade. If you've done well, but you could have done better, it might be that you need to do a bit more revision, or it could be because you didn't quite know how to answer the questions. Just be honest there with yourself, with everybody. It doesn't matter what you write. It matters that you've reflected on why you've got the grades that you've got. That's what question 8's all about. 9. Loads of things have influenced law and order. The church in the medieval period, the local community, king, royal authority. The government passing laws, if you go later on into the period. The media influences law and order. Attitudes in society. Technology affects law and order. When new technologies come in, computers, cybercrime happens. All of the things that we've mentioned in the past really influence law and order, but it depends in the period you're looking at as to what the most applicable thing to talk about is. You were asked between the year 10,000 and 1700. I know you were asked about the medieval period about this. So the church, local communities, and the king, the royal authority, they were the things that had the biggest influence on law and order at that time. If you were asked about the 20th century, technology, had a big influence. Earlier it did as well. What reasons were there for punishments? Lots of you just wrote about deterrent. There's other reasons. Transportation just gets the criminal out of the country. It's like a punishment that removes the criminal from society, as does capital punishment. So you've got removal, you've got a deterrent. You could also have reform, houses of correction. The prisoners were put to such hard work, it was designed to show them the value of hard work, so they would change their ways, mend their ways when they came out of prison. So you did have that as well. And retribution, revenge. There's examples of revenge. That's not necessarily revenge, but retribution is giving back to the victims in some ways. It's basically the punishment sort of fit in the crime. Fair guild is retribution. The victim's family had somebody killed, they get a load of money for it. It's retribution. Taking a hand from a thief may be seen as retribution, because the thief has stolen something with their hands, you chop their hand off to sort of get them back for what they have done. Retribution's a bit more of a wishy-washy one, but if you can understand it, great, because it's a good one to use. You can't just write about deterrent. And finally, what is a line of reasoning? It's your argument. What was the main reason? In a 16 marker, it should be in your intro, it should appear through your paragraphs, and it should be in your conclusion. In a 12 marker, your line of reasoning might appear, but you've only got 3 paragraphs, or 2, but it should be there somewhere at the start, really. Maybe a good way to do it would be to have your first of your 3 paragraphs, the main reason. And then you can refer back to it in the other paragraphs when you're explaining why the factor you're talking about, though important, isn't as important as the one you wrote about in the first paragraph. And there you go, that should be enough to be able to answer the key questions on the mock exam feedback.